I never thought I would be the guy writing out my heartbreak for the world to see. But here I am, pouring my soul onto the internet in the hopes that sharing might ease the sting. My name's Jacob, and I'm a 29-year-old guy from a small town in Ohio, though I moved to Seattle for work about 4 years ago. I guess I always believed in love stories with happy endings, the kind of fairy tales that featured a neat bow at the end of the movie reel. My family would tease me about being a hopeless romantic, but I liked to think I was just full of hope. Maybe that's why this betrayal hit me so hard, because I never saw it coming. Or maybe I refused to see it. The one who broke me is named Madison. She's a 27-year-old fitness trainer with an infectious laugh and a pair of eyes that could convince me everything was right in the world. And ironically, it was that same laugh that echoed in my mind when I found out she had been cheating on me for months with one of my best friends, Lucas. It's been a nightmare that still doesn't feel real, but the pain in my chest reminds me every day that it is. I'm posting this on Reddit because, frankly, I need to tell the story somewhere. Even if it's just to a bunch of strangers on the internet, I need to let this ache out before it devours me. So, buckle up, because this might be a long, raw, and emotional ride, and I hope you'll forgive me if my words are drenched in bitterness and heartbreak. I never intended to be this guy, but life rarely follows our plans, does it? I first met Madison at a local charity run in Seattle, back when I was trying to focus on my health and maybe meet a few new people in the city. I spotted her warming up near the starting line. She was wearing bright running shoes that practically lit up in the early morning gloom. She turned my way, and I remember how the corners of her mouth curved into that radiant grin. It was like she'd known me all her life, though we'd never laid eyes on each other before. That's the thing about Madison, she made you feel seen. My heart thrummed in my chest, and I decided to walk over and introduce myself. Something about the confidence in her posture and the warmth in her eyes just drew me in, and I guess I was in the right place at the right time. We chatted about the running route, the local coffee shops she recommended, and before I knew it, we were running side by side, laughing whenever one of us fell behind and caught up again. At the end of the run, she wrote her number on my forearm with a Sharpie, telling me to text her before the ink wore off. I couldn't wash that arm for 2 days, just because I wanted to preserve every moment of that meeting. That's how we started, with a spark that could have rivaled fireworks. Soon enough, we were going on actual dates, grabbing smoothies after her workouts, exploring the hidden gems of the Seattle food scene, and spending lazy afternoons at Pike Place Market. I found out that beneath her contagious energy lay a gentle soul who was passionate about helping people. She told me she became a fitness trainer to inspire others to believe in themselves, to break through the mental barriers that trap us all. I admired that about her. I remember how she'd talk about her clients like they were family, and how her day could be made by a small victory in someone else's life. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. In my mind, I had found someone who not only seemed to love me, but who also radiated kindness and drove me to become a better version of myself. My friends used to joke that I'd found my future wife, and I'd grin, imagining how perfect that future might be. Because it felt real. Her enthusiasm, her empathy, her big heart. We moved in together after about a year of dating. Some people told me it was too soon, but it felt right. We were both ready to take the next step, and it made sense financially too. We found a cozy one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. One of those places with a small balcony that overlooked a courtyard filled with evergreen trees. We'd spend Sunday mornings sipping coffee out there, talking about everything and nothing. Our families back home, random conspiracy theories we thought were hilarious, upcoming events with our friends. We had an actual chalkboard wall in the kitchen, where Madison would jot down uplifting quotes or doodle silly drawings to remind me to smile. That's the environment we lived in. A space full of positivity. Or so I thought. Now, Lucas comes into the picture. I've known Lucas since college in Ohio. We weren't best friends then, but we ended up at the same university and ran in the same circle. When I moved to Seattle, we reconnected by pure coincidence. I was grabbing groceries one night, and there he was, searching the produce aisle for ripe avocados. We recognized each other instantly, started chatting about how we both ended up on the West Coast, and in no time we fell back into an easy friendship. Lucas was the life of the party, always joking around, always ready to plan the next road trip or bar crawl. I introduced him to Madison a couple of months after I met her. The three of us would go hiking, check out new restaurants, sometimes even host game nights at our apartment. I remember telling Madison that Lucas was like a brother to me, someone I could trust with anything. I suppose that's why the betrayal stings the most, because it came from two people I trusted more than anyone else in the world. The first inkling of trouble came in the form of subtle changes I noticed in Madison's behavior. She started becoming more distant. She'd hide her phone screen when I walked in the room, or she'd say she was going out to meet a girlfriend I'd never heard of before. I tried convincing myself I was just paranoid. We all need our space and privacy, right? But there were times she'd come home way later than she initially said, or she'd text me from girls' night out. But something about the tone of her messages felt off. That warm, comforting presence she always exuded started to slip away, replaced by a kind of tension that I couldn't quite place. I remember one night I worked late, and I came home to find her asleep on the couch with her phone in her hand. A text notification popped up from Lucas, and I noticed it said something like, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I was thrown, but I pushed away the suspicion. They were friends too, right? Maybe they were just planning a hike. Still, I couldn't shake this heaviness from my chest. The cracks in our relationship grew wider. She became more irritable when I asked about her day, or she'd dodge questions about where she'd been. Intimacy between us started feeling forced, like she was just going through the motions. I tried to remedy it by planning romantic evenings, cooking her favorite meals, or suggesting we take a weekend getaway to reconnect. She'd accept these gestures half-heartedly, but her eyes never lit up the way they used to. It broke my heart, because I felt her slipping away, yet I couldn't figure out how to pull her back. Some nights I'd lie in bed while she scrolled through her phone next to me, and I'd feel more alone than if I'd actually been in an empty room. I chalked it up to stress, or maybe a rough patch in our relationship. We all go through those, right? One afternoon, I got a call from Lucas, who asked if he could swing by my apartment to talk about something personal. It struck me as odd, but I said sure. When he showed up, he was nervous, pacing around our living room like he was searching for words that were impossible to find. I offered him a beer, and he declined. A first for him, because usually he was the guy to crack a joke about day drinking. Instead, he looked at me with this guilty expression, and all I could think was that something terrible had happened. But then he said, "I've been seeing someone close to you." I felt the color drain from my face. Even then, I didn't want to believe it was Madison. It could have been a coworker, a cousin, some friend we shared that he'd met at a party. The possibility that it was Madison never even properly registered in my mind. I guess I was in denial. But he confessed that he and Madison had been texting for weeks, that something between them had sparked at a party we'd all attended. One thing led to another, and apparently they'd crossed lines they shouldn't have. He tried to convince me they hadn't slept together, just kissed. Maybe he was telling the truth, maybe he wasn't. It didn't matter in that moment. I felt physically ill. I wanted to throw him out of my home. I think I actually did at one point. I remember my voice shaking as I told him to get out. But he kept pleading with me, saying it was a mistake, that he didn't want to ruin our friendship, that he wasn't trying to break Madison and me up. He claimed he felt something genuine for her, that it just happened, and he hated himself for it. All I felt was a numb sort of betrayal, like a dagger had been shoved into my back and twisted. Here was a person I considered a brother, telling me he'd been kissing my girlfriend. It was surreal, a dark cloud enveloping all the good memories I had of them. Finally, I just told him I needed space and slammed the door. I slumped against it, trying to breathe, trying to calm the storm of anger and confusion in my chest. When Madison came home later, I confronted her. I expected tears, confessions, a meltdown, something. But she just stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and guilt, which quickly gave way to defiance. She tried to deny it at first, which only fueled my rage. I remember yelling, "Lucas was here! He told me everything!" She broke down then, sobbing that it was just one mistake, that it happened because she felt I had been emotionally distant. She said she was sorry, but also tried to place blame on me. That stung even more. I felt like I was being gaslit, like the rug was being yanked from under me, and I was the one at fault for not noticing it sooner. I asked her, "If you felt something was off between us, why wouldn't you just talk to me instead of running into someone else's arms?" She offered no satisfactory answer. She just kept crying, repeating that she never meant to hurt me, that she'd made a terrible mistake. I wanted to believe her. My heart wanted to wrap her up in my arms and fix everything, because that's who I am. But this wasn't something easily fixed with an apology and a promise. Our relationship limped along for a short while after that. She swore she'd cut ties with Lucas, that it was over and just a momentary lapse in judgment. Against my better instincts, I tried to give her a chance to redeem herself. I insisted we go to couples counseling, and she agreed, though she seemed reluctant. We found a therapist nearby, someone who specialized in relationship problems. For a while, those sessions felt somewhat productive. Madison expressed how she had been worried we were drifting apart, how her conversations with Lucas started innocently, until she felt a spark between them that made her feel alive. She cried when she recounted the guilt she felt afterward. I sat there, hollowed out, listening to the woman I loved describe how another man had made her feel something I apparently couldn't provide. The therapist encouraged us to communicate more openly, to set boundaries. I tried, I really did. I opened up about how betrayed I felt, how I was willing to forgive, but couldn't just forget. Part of me believed that if she truly wanted to make it work, we could rebuild our bond. But deep down, the seeds of doubt had already been planted. I'd imagine her texting Lucas behind my back, or meeting up with him the moment I wasn't around. I hated that paranoia, and I hated myself for feeling it. Then came the day everything unraveled for good. I was cleaning the apartment, just a normal Saturday morning, vacuuming the living room while Madison was off at the gym training a client, and I decided to gather up some laundry. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a line from a text message preview flashing across the screen. It said something like, "I can't wait to hold you again." My stomach churned. The contact name read Laura, which was obviously bogus, because I'd heard that name before when Madison claimed she was hanging out with a new friend from the gym. My heart pounded in my ears, but I unlocked her phone. There it was. A whole string of messages from Lucas, under the fake name Laura, where they talked about sneaking around and how guilty she felt, but how she couldn't resist seeing him. They'd apparently met up the night before, while I was working late. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I read lines where she mentioned how she missed him, how she couldn't wait until my next business trip so they could spend more quality time together. It was like a punch to the gut. I sat on the edge of our bed, reading all these texts that revealed not only had she never truly cut ties with Lucas, but they were deeper in their affair than ever. Everything she told me about wanting to fix our relationship was a lie. I couldn't stand to stay in the apartment a second longer. I left, taking only my wallet, my phone, and my car keys. My mind was spinning, my emotions bouncing from heartbreak to rage to a hollow kind of acceptance. I ended up parking at a random spot near the waterfront, watching the gray Seattle skies drift overhead, trying to make sense of how my life had collapsed so suddenly. I called my sister, Rachel, who lives back in Ohio. She picked up, cheerful at first, until she heard the tremor in my voice. That's when I broke down. I told her everything, from Lucas's confession to the second wave of betrayal. She was furious, told me to leave Madison and never look back. I knew she was right, but some part of me still loved the woman I had once seen as my soulmate. I felt torn between anger, sorrow, and this desperate craving for the life I'd imagined, one that clearly no longer existed. Rachel insisted I pack my things and either get Madison out of that apartment or leave myself. She said I didn't deserve to be disrespected like that. As I sat there talking to her, tears streaming down my face, I knew she was right. And still it felt so final, like if I walked away, I was giving up on everything I had worked so hard to build. Madison called me a dozen times that day, left voicemails begging me to come home, to let her explain. I ignored them all. In the evening, I finally mustered the courage to return to the apartment, not to talk, but to pack my essentials. She was there, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The moment I walked in, she dropped to her knees, clinging to me, sobbing. She said she was stupid, that she loved me, that Lucas meant nothing compared to me. But I just stood there, numb, not even able to comfort her, because she had shattered something in me that I didn't think could ever be fixed. I told her it was over, that I couldn't handle another second of her lies, and her face contorted in agony. She insisted she'd block Lucas forever. Said she'd prove her loyalty if I just gave her one more chance. She begged me to think about all the good times, about our plans for the future, about how we could overcome this if we really tried. And in that moment, I realized a part of me wanted to cave, wanted to hold her, and pretend this was all a nightmare we could wake up from. But the texts were burned into my memory. The words about how she couldn't wait for me to be out of town so they could have more time together. That knowledge felt like shards of glass in my heart, so I pulled away from her gently, because despite everything, I never wanted to hurt her physically or even lash out. I just needed to leave. I spent that night in my car, parked in a Walmart lot, because I couldn't bear the thought of going to a friend's house and explaining my humiliation in person. I was exhausted, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. I saw her smiling in the way she used to smile for me. It was a torment I can't put into words. I felt smaller than I ever had in my entire life, like my dreams had been tossed into a shredder. The next day, I checked into a cheap motel, told my boss I needed a few days off for personal reasons, and tried to wrap my head around the fact that the life I'd built in Seattle was crumbling beneath my feet. I was in a city far from home, with no family around, betrayed by my best friend and the woman I loved. The sense of isolation was crushing. Eventually, I decided to confide in a couple of other close friends, Amanda and Trevor, whom I'd gotten to know through work. They were shocked, but they offered me their spare room until I could figure out a permanent solution. I swallowed my pride and accepted. They helped me move my stuff out of the apartment when Madison wasn't there. I piled everything into boxes, my chest tight with memories of how excited we were the day we moved in together. I remember carefully hanging pictures of us on the walls, wanting everything to look perfect. Now, I was taking them down, each photo a painful reminder of what I thought we had. In the midst of packing, I found old love notes she wrote me. Those little doodles on the chalkboard that said things like, "You are my sunshine," or "I love you more every day." I stuffed them away hastily, unable to bear reading them. It felt like a different lifetime, like those gestures belonged to strangers I barely recognized. After I left, Madison sent me endless messages, ranging from tearful apologies to angry accusations that I was being too harsh by shutting her out. She claimed Lucas meant nothing, that it was a sexual fling she didn't know how to stop. Then she'd switch tactics, blaming me for not being emotionally available, for not seeing how she needed more excitement in her life. It was dizzying, and I eventually blocked her number because I couldn't handle the emotional whiplash. Lucas tried reaching out too, which enraged me. He wrote me an email, saying how sorry he was, that he never intended to destroy my relationship. He spoke about how he'd hate himself for this for the rest of his life, but that he hoped we could talk one day. I didn't respond. In my mind, Lucas was dead to me. Maybe one day I'll find forgiveness, but I'm nowhere near that point now. The weeks that followed were a blur of pain, self-loathing, and random bursts of anger that I didn't know what to do with. I'd alternate between sobbing uncontrollably and staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing at all. My work suffered. My boss noticed I was withdrawn, making mistakes on projects that normally came easily to me. I confided in him partially, just said I was going through a breakup, and he showed me compassion, telling me to take whatever time I needed. It helped to know I wasn't going to lose my job on top of everything else, but it didn't fix the hole in my chest. I tried going out for runs again, thinking maybe I'd find some peace in the exercise that once brought me joy. But every time I laced up my running shoes, I remembered that first day I met Madison at the charity run, how her laughter made me believe in magic. The memory would slice through me, and I'd end up quitting halfway through. Day by day, I forced myself to function. I leaned heavily on my friends, who invited me to movie nights, barbecue gatherings, or just out for drinks, trying to distract me from my pain. I'd laugh at jokes I barely heard, smile politely at stories I couldn't really focus on. I knew they were trying to help, and I appreciated it, but it felt like I was living in slow motion, waiting for the heartbreak to pass. At one point, I considered moving back to Ohio, where my family could support me, but I couldn't bring myself to give up on Seattle entirely. Not yet. This city still felt like a place of possibility, even though it also held these devastating memories. People say heartbreak is like grief. You go through stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Mine were all mixed together, crashing over me in unpredictable waves. Some mornings, I'd wake up furious, wanting to call Madison and scream at her for destroying my trust. Other days I'd wake up numb, feeling like there was nothing left in me to give. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, questioning my worth, wondering if I wasn't enough for her. The mental gymnastics nearly drove me insane. I'd think about all the nights we spent cuddling on the couch, her head on my shoulder, and ask myself how she could betray me so completely while sharing that kind of intimacy with me. Did she ever love me? Or was it all a lie? One particularly dark night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of us at the beach, smiling selfies at a baseball game, random snapshots of her making funny faces at restaurants. I think I wanted to torture myself, to remind myself of what I lost. I ended up throwing my phone across the room in frustration, the screen cracking against the wall. That's when I realized I needed help, more than just venting to friends or quietly nursing my wounds. So I sought out a therapist. The first few sessions were rough. I couldn't talk about Madison without feeling that lump in my throat, that hot anger simmering beneath the surface. But slowly the therapy started to help me unravel my emotions. I discovered a lot about myself, about how I tend to idealize people, put them on a pedestal, and ignore red flags in the name of optimism. That doesn't justify what Madison did, but it gave me clarity on how I ended up so blindsided. Around this time, rumors started swirling among our mutual friends. Some took Madison's side, claiming I had always been a workaholic, distant and cold, which might have pushed her into Lucas's arms. Others sympathized with me, saying Madison and Lucas were selfish and immature, that I deserved someone better. I tried to avoid the gossip, but it was everywhere, especially among the crowd that used to come to our game nights. I'd go out for a drink, and someone would awkwardly mention hearing rumors of me cheating on Madison first, which was absolutely untrue. It was maddening, but I learned quickly that controlling the narrative was impossible. People believe what they want to believe. I realized all I could do was stand in my own truth and try to heal. Strangely, I found a form of solace in journaling, which is partly why I decided to share my story here on Reddit. I started writing down every emotion, every flash of memory, every pang of regret. It's like I was performing emotional surgery on myself, dissecting what happened so I could stitch my heart back together. It's a messy process, full of tears and nights where I just stared at my notebook, too overwhelmed to put words on paper. But the more I wrote, the more I saw that I was starting to let go of the anger and focus on how I could move forward. I still have days where I feel like I'm drowning, but at least I can see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. As the weeks turned into months, Madison's attempts to contact me waned. Occasionally I'd see her number pop up on my phone, but I never answered. I changed my locks and told the front desk at my apartment building. I'd moved into a smaller studio by then, not to let her in under any circumstances. Lucas reached out again via email, but I deleted his messages without reading them. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses or justifications. The heartbreak was enough. I didn't need more words to pollute my mind. Some might say I should confront him, yell at him, release the anger I feel, but honestly, I don't think it would do any good. He knows what he did. Madison knows what she did. I refused to grant them the satisfaction of witnessing my continued pain. Eventually, I unblocked Madison's number, though I never reached out first. I think I did it more for closure than anything else. One evening, she texted me a long message apologizing again, saying she understood now the full impact of what she'd done and that she was in therapy too. She said she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her someday, even if we could never be together again. Reading those words, I didn't feel the surge of anger I expected. Instead, I felt an odd, distant empathy. Maybe she really did regret it. Maybe she truly had no intention of hurting me, but that doesn't change the outcome. I wish her well in a detached sort of way, but there's no future for us. That ship sailed the moment she decided to keep lying after claiming she'd stop. Now, I'm living alone in a modest studio near the city center. It's not as cozy or warm as the place I shared with Madison, but it's mine, my space, my sanctuary from betrayal. I've reconnected with some old hobbies, like painting. I'm not particularly good at it, but it's therapeutic to throw colors onto a canvas, letting my feelings flow. I go running again too, albeit on different paths that don't remind me of her. Sometimes I'll catch myself thinking about the good times, or seeing glimpses of her in random strangers on the street, but the ache is less suffocating now. I can breathe through it. I can see a future for myself that doesn't revolve around her smile or her laughter. If there's one thing I've learned through this entire ordeal, it's that trust is fragile. We like to think our relationships are solid, built on unbreakable foundations of love and loyalty. But one betrayal, one series of lies, can fracture everything beyond repair. It's terrifying to realize how powerless we are once someone decides to break our trust. And yet, I refuse to become bitter or cynical. I still believe in love. I still believe in hope, even if I'm bruised and battered from this experience. Maybe I'll be more cautious in the future. Maybe I'll pay closer attention to red flags. But I won't let this define me forever. Sometimes people ask if I hate Madison or Lucas. In the deepest sense, no. I hate what they did, the lies, the betrayal. But hating them personally would only poison me further. I want to let that negativity go and focus on rebuilding myself. If I carry that hatred around, it'll only weigh me down, keep me shackled to a past that no longer exists. Healing is about acceptance, about acknowledging what happened, but not letting it control your life. It's not an easy path, but every day I walk it, I feel a little less broken. My family's been supportive, calling me often, urging me to visit Ohio whenever I need a break from Seattle. I might take them up on that soon, spend a week or two back home, reconnect with old friends, let my parents fuss over me. It's strange to realize that after all these years of forging my independence, I now feel drawn to the comfort of the place where I grew up. I guess heartbreak has a way of making you long for the familiar. For the simpler times before adult relationships and responsibilities weighed you down. I've also started to open up to new friendships. Amanda and Trevor remain rock-solid support. They've introduced me to some of their friends, and we've had a few group outings that were genuinely enjoyable. For the first time in months, I've caught myself genuinely laughing at jokes, genuinely smiling at the little quirks of everyday life. That sense of normalcy is precious, like a small flower growing from the scorched earth of my old relationship. I haven't ventured into the dating scene yet. I'm not ready for that. I need to be alone with myself for a while, to ensure I've healed enough not to bleed all over someone who didn't cut me. But the thought of eventually finding love again doesn't feel as impossible as it did when the wound was fresh. As I continue this new chapter, I've realized that heartbreak can be a turning point, a chance to learn more about who I am. Yes, it's painful. It's the kind of pain that kept me awake at night, imagining Madison with someone else, imagining all the lies. But it has also forced me to grow, to examine my own patterns in relationships, to acknowledge how I might have neglected my own emotional needs. I'm not blaming myself for her cheating, absolutely not, but I am trying to see how I can become stronger, more self-aware, so I don't lose myself in love again. That's what she took from me, my sense of security in my own worth, and I'm determined to reclaim it. I look back on the day I met Madison, and it feels like a dream. A lifetime ago, I was this optimistic guy believing in happily ever after. Now, I still believe in happiness, but I'm wiser to the fact that it might not come in the exact shape I expect. People are complicated. Love is complicated, and sometimes, The ones who bring the most sunshine into your life are the ones who will cast the darkest shadows when they betray you. It's a bitter lesson, but one I'm coming to terms with. I hope she finds whatever it is she's looking for, and I hope Lucas someday understands the depth of the trust he shattered. But more importantly, I hope I find peace within myself, because that's the only thing I can control. So, if you've made it this far, dear Reddit, thank you for sharing this journey with me. Writing it all out has been both cathartic and harrowing, like ripping off a bandage, but finally letting the wound get some air. I don't know if my story offers any grand lessons, other than the cliché that we should value ourselves enough to walk away from those who hurt us. But maybe someone out there reading this has gone through something similar, and they'll find some solidarity in knowing they're not alone. Hearts break every day, and somehow we keep going, we keep hoping, we keep living. That's the human experience, I suppose. Finding the strength to rise from the ashes of our broken dreams, forging a new path even when our old one has been washed away. For now, I'm breathing, I'm healing, and I'm learning how to trust myself again. And that, as painful as it's been, is a step toward a new kind of freedom.